A massive white shape emerges through the Arctic wind as snow sweeps across the frozen sea. Silent, patient, and built for one of the harshest environments on Earth, the polar bear moves across the ice, searching for the slightest sign of movement below. Every step conserves energy. Every pause hides intent. From fragile sea ice to desperate escapes across freezing water, survival in the Arctic can change in seconds once the hunt begins. Because when a polar bear locks onto a target, the frozen wilderness offers very few second chances. Across the frozen Arctic Ocean, endless sheets of sea ice stretch beneath a pale gray sky while freezing wind sweeps across the surface. Somewhere beneath the thick ice, a seal moves silently through the dark water below. Nearby, a polar bear has already begun waiting. The massive predator stands motionless beside a small breathing hole in the ice, conserving every ounce of energy in temperatures that can plunge far below 0 degrees or higher. Unlike fast chases seen in warmer climates, polar bears often rely on patience more than speed. Sometimes the wait can last for hours. Snow slowly gathers across its thick white fur. The bear barely moves, listening for the faint sound of movement beneath the frozen surface. A powerful sense of smell allows polar bears to detect seals from remarkable distances, even through layers of snow and ice. Then the ice suddenly shifts. A seal rises carefully toward the narrow opening for air, unaware that the predator above has already locked onto the exact location. The reaction is immediate. The Arctic silence explodes into motion for only a brief moment before the struggle disappears beside the frozen hole. Snow scatters across the ice as the wind continues sweeping through the empty landscape. Moments later, the bear slowly moves away across the drifting sea, ice once again disappearing back into the endless white Arctic wilderness. Along a remote Arctic shoreline, hundreds of walruses crowd together across the rocky coast while freezing waves crash against the ice behind them. Massive bodies press tightly side by side, creating a wall of movement and noise along the narrow beach. Then a polar bear appears above the shoreline. The bear moves carefully across the rocks, watching the crowded colony below for any sign of weakness or separation. Adult walruses can weigh well over 2,000 pounds, and their long tusks make direct confrontation extremely dangerous, even for a predator this powerful. The tension spreads quickly through the colony. Several walruses shift toward the water, while younger animals remain trapped between the moving bodies along the shore. The polar bear advances cautiously, forcing sudden waves of movement through the crowded group without rushing directly into the center. For several chaotic moments, the rocky coastline erupts with noise, crashing water and shifting bodies along the ice-covered beach. Then the colony suddenly surges back toward the freezing ocean, disappearing beneath the Arctic spray, while the polar bear remains standing alone above the shoreline once again. far from solid ice freezing. Arctic water stretches for miles beneath a sky covered in gray clouds. Small fragments of drifting ice move slowly with the current, while powerful waves roll across the open sea. A polar bear is already in the water. Using enormous front paws like paddles, the bear pushes steadily through the freezing ocean with calm, controlled movement. Polar bears are capable of swimming for hours across icy conditions while searching for stable ice food or new hunting grounds. But the Arctic is changing constantly. In warmer seasons, sea ice can drift farther apart, forcing bears to travel greater distances through open water while conserving as much energy as possible. Every movement becomes part of survival in an environment where exhaustion can quickly become dangerous. The bear continues forward through the cold gray waves. Then, in the distance, a larger sheet of ice slowly emerges through the drifting fog. Moments later, the exhausted swimmer pulls itself onto the frozen surface, while icy water pours back into the sea below. Around it, the Arctic remains silent, except for the endless sound of wind and moving ice. Along the barren Arctic coastline, a mother polar bear and her cubs move carefully across the frozen shore after weeks of difficult travel. Food is scarce here, and the long northern cold leaves little room for wasted energy. Then the wind carries a different scent across the ice. Far ahead on the shoreline rests the enormous carcass of a bowhead whale, enough food to attract polar bears from miles away across the Arctic coast. One by one, massive white shapes begin appearing through the drifting snow. The mother immediately keeps her cubs close beside her. Other bears are already surrounding the carcass, and competition along the frozen shoreline can quickly become dangerous for younger cubs. A larger bear approaches through the snow, while the mother rises defensively, refusing to retreat from the narrow stretch of ice. For several tense moments, the Arctic wind becomes the only sound along the crowded shore. Then the larger bear slowly backs away across the frozen shoreline. Keeping her cubs close, the mother finally leads them toward the massive whale carcass, a rare chance for the young bears to feed and recover in the unforgiving Arctic cold. Along a narrow Arctic inlet, white beluga whales move through the shallow coastal water as the rising tide slowly pushes them closer to shore. Nearby, two male polar bears wait along the rocky coastline, but each chooses a very different strategy. One bear charges directly into the water. He splashes forward through the icy channel, attempting to close the distance as the belugas quickly scatter farther into deeper water beyond his reach. In open water, speed alone offers little advantage against fast-moving whales. The second bear barely moves at all. An older male remains positioned silently atop a carefully chosen rock, while the tide continues rising around him. Slowly, the water covers the stone beneath his body, but the bear refuses to abandon the spot. He has learned to let the ocean do the work. As the tide pushes the belugas closer through the narrow inlet, the patient hunter waits for the perfect moment, while the younger bear continues wasting energy in the freezing water nearby. In the Arctic, experience can become just as valuable as strength especially for predators surviving on a coastline ruled by tides and timing. Across the open Arctic ice, a polar bear moves slowly through deep snow while freezing wind sweeps across the empty landscape. Nearby, a small Arctic fox suddenly appears in the distance, carefully following the massive predator from behind. The bear barely reacts. In the Arctic, foxes often trail larger hunters for a simple reason: survival. A successful polar bear hunt can leave behind enough scattered remains to support smaller scavengers across the frozen wilderness. The fox keeps its distance carefully. Every time the polar bear stops, the smaller animal freezes instantly against the snow. Then, as the bear continues forward, the fox quietly resumes, following across the ice-covered terrain. For miles, both animals move through the same frozen world under the endless Arctic wind. One survives through power and endurance. The other survives through patience and opportunity. Together, they reveal how even the harshest environments remain connected by the constant struggle to endure the northern cold. Deep within the Arctic snowdrifts, hidden beneath layers of packed ice and wind-blown snow, a polar bear mother rests inside a narrow den with her young cubs beside her. Outside, the frozen landscape remains locked beneath months of brutal winter cold. Inside the den, everything is silent. Polar bear mothers can spend months sheltering in these snow dens after giving birth, conserving energy, while the cubs slowly grow strong enough to face the Arctic world beyond the entrance. At birth, the cubs weigh little more than a pound, despite the massive size of their mother. But spring is beginning to return to the north. Soft light filters through the snow above as the mother slowly rises and moves toward the entrance for the first time in months. The cubs follow carefully behind her, stepping unsteadily through the narrow tunnel carved into the snow. Then the Arctic finally opens before them. Endless white sea ice stretches across the horizon, while freezing wind sweeps over the newborn cubs for the very first time. For the young bears, the long struggle for survival has only just begun. As Arctic temperatures begin falling, once again, thin layers of fresh ice slowly spread across the surface of the Northern Sea. After months of open water and difficult travel on land, the frozen world begins returning piece by piece. For polar bears, this changes everything. Across the coastline, bears that spent the warmer season wandering the tundra now move back toward the forming sea ice, where hunting opportunities slowly begin to return. The frozen surface once again becomes a pathway across the Arctic Ocean. A large male steps carefully onto the new ice. The surface cracks softly beneath his weight, while freezing wind drifts across the dark water surrounding him. Far ahead, seals begin reappearing near newly formed breathing holes scattered across the expanding ice field. The bear pauses only for a moment before continuing deeper into the Arctic. Behind him, the coastline slowly disappears beneath falling snow, while the frozen sea stretches endlessly into the gray northern horizon once again. As winter tightens across the Arctic once again, fresh sea ice begins spreading across the dark northern ocean. Day by day, the frozen surface stretches farther from the coastline, reconnecting hunting grounds lost during the warmer months. One by one, polar bears begin returning to the ice. Large males move steadily across the expanding frozen sea, while younger bears follow the shifting edge deeper into the Arctic. After months spent wandering barren coastlines and open tundra, the frozen ocean once again becomes the center of survival. The landscape itself begins to change. Wind sweeps snow across newly formed ice ridges, while distant cracks echo through the freezing silence beneath the gray northern sky. Far ahead, seals gradually return to the expanding ice field as life slowly reshapes itself around the coming Arctic winter. And across the endless white horizon, the hunters continue moving north with the returning ice beneath their feet. Across the Arctic, survival is never guaranteed. Ice breaks apart. Storms reshape the coastline. Hunger can follow even the strongest hunters for months across the frozen north. Yet the polar bear continues forward through it all, across drifting sea ice, freezing water, and endless snow carried by the Arctic wind. Each season changes the landscape. Each journey becomes harder. But the ancient rhythm between hunter and ice still endures beneath the northern sky. And far beyond the frozen horizon, a lone white figure slowly disappears into the drifting snow as the Arctic closes silently behind it.